Hello. Today I want to talk to you about how I came to be here at Lumiere, but also, perhaps more importantly, about fear, specifically the kind of fear that holds you back from doing something, that prevents you from achieving some goal you've set for yourself, or trying something that you'd like to try, and how to overcome that fear. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ms. Fanciullacci. I'm the new Latin teacher here at Lumiere. And as you might expect for a Latin teacher, I really like language. I like grammar, words, figuring out how language works and evolves, and all the wonderful things that it can express. I started taking Latin in 8th grade. There were many factors that went into my deciding to take Latin over the other languages my school offered. One, I was a nerd. And I think Latin does appeal to that. I say that lovingly. And I think Latin does appeal to that demographic. I loved learning about the ancient Romans, their myths, legends, stories, history. I loved puzzling out Latin sentences, figuring out how to translate a sentence, how to fill out all the different endings for nouns and verbs. My Latin students might disagree with me about embracing that complexity of the Latin language, but I loved it. There was an excellent, enthusiastic teacher at the middle school who instilled in me the same passion for the language that she herself had. But there's another reason for my deciding to take Latin, and perhaps a less noble one, and that was that Latin was a dead language, which meant I didn't have to speak it in class. I was a good student. I worked hard, got good grades, read a lot, but I was a very painfully shy student. I kept my head down. I was a student who sat at the back of the classroom, and even if I knew the answer, I would keep my hand down and pray that the teacher didn't call on me. I was afraid of looking foolish, of calling any attention to myself, of making a mistake. And I let that fear occasionally hold me back from doing things. In Latin class, there weren't any presentations, no conversations to have with your fellow students to be presented in front of the class, no one-on-one presentations with the teacher and judging you how you speak and pronounce the language. I could just write down my homework, and that was enough. I kept taking Latin into high school because I genuinely liked the language. I went to a vastly different high school than you guys here at Lumiere. I went to a public high school, grades 10 through 12 only, but in those 3 grades, the school encompassed over 3,000 students, and my graduating class alone was 1,027. In a school like that, it's quite easy to get lost, both literally and figuratively. It's easy to blend into the background, and I took advantage of that opportunity to blend in, try and be hidden. And I would let that fear overtake me, the fear of standing out, of speaking what I wanted to speak. And I used to be in the middle of Latin class and think that I'd love to do something with this language, love to continue studying it, and then one day to share that passion and that knowledge with others. But I used to look up at my teachers and think that I could never do that I could never stand up there in front of everyone and share that passion in that public space, to be there in front of everybody. And so I let that fear fester in the back of my mind and let it keep me back from thinking about achieving that goal. I went on to take Latin in college. The thing about Latin is that it's not necessarily the most popular choice of language that a school has to offer. And that means smaller class sizes, especially since I went to a college that was smaller than my massive high school. And so I saw the size of my Latin and classics classes dwindling, getting smaller and smaller. I remember one Greek class I had senior year, there was just 3 students, including me. And so for those of you here at Lumiere, this class size of 7, 5, 10 doesn't sound that remarkable, but for me, it was a big change. And I found in those small classes, I was compelled to speak up, to not just answer questions when called on, but to express opinions and ideas about the Latin literature we were reading, and to do so in front of class. And it was a scary experience. But it's in those close-knit classes, those small groups, that I learned to not let my passion for Latin fly under the radar, that I learned to speak up and actively participate in something that I was passionate about. So for those of you who maybe feel similar things here at this school, I want you to cherish the opportunities that La Lumiere's uniqueness and close-knit community and support provides you. Use such opportunities to grow and to challenge yourself. And after college, I was still unsure of whether I could really achieve that goal of being a Latin teacher, but I decided to take a Latin job teaching at a local public school. And after the first few nerve-wracking days, I found that not only could I do it, but I wanted to do it, and I enjoyed doing it. So I went back to school after that, got my master's degree, and didn't let any fear I had about achieving that goal stop me from trying. And so for all of you, I'm sure you all have your own fears and doubts that hold you back, that stop you from trying something that you'd like to achieve or to try. And so whether it's majoring in or whether it's applying to your top choice college or accepting it because you're not sure if you can handle it, or majoring in what you want to major in if you're not sure of the job prospects, or participating in class, or something as simple as learning how to swim if you're afraid of the water. We all have these fears, and we let fears make us doubt ourselves or keep us from trying. I challenge you not to let fear hold you back. You may experience setbacks, you may experience failures, as Ms. Hunt talked about last week. But that does not mean you should not try. Don't let fear hold you back from trying something that you want to achieve. Challenge yourself to achieve what you want and overcome the obstacles and struggles that you will face, even those, or especially those, that will come from within. So I want to sort of wrap up this talk by sharing with you a quote from a Latin book that is especially important to me. It comes from Virgil's epic masterpiece, the Aeneid. The Latin 3 students are currently reading another work by Virgil, his Eclogues, but the Aeneid is what he is most known for. Virgil is one of the most famous Latin Roman poets, perhaps the most famous in his own day, and he has been a sort of constant presence in my life. My first Latin AP class in high school was all about Virgil's Aeneid. My first year of college, I took a class on the Aeneid again. And in my first semester of graduate school, I again studied the Aeneid. And in fact, I ended up writing my thesis on the Aeneid a year later. It's a wonderfully complex book, and one that I could always find something new in every time I reread it. The Aeneid was written like the Greek Iliad and Odyssey, and some of you might have read those books or one of those books, or might be about to read them. It was written about one of the heroes of the Trojan War in ancient Greece, Aeneas. Except Aeneas was not one of the Greeks, he was one of the Trojans, which meant he was on the losing side of the war. And so at the end of the war, the Greeks ransacked Troy and burned the city to the ground, leaving the Trojans destitute and without a home. So Aeneas escapes Troy, gathering some of his fellow Trojans with him, and they set out to sea in search of a new home. They find themselves lost and adrift on the open sea, and there's a massive storm. They end up on a strange shore in a new land, and they are scared. They do not know what they need to do, what they should do. They don't know how to go on, and they wonder whether they should persevere through these hardships and these fears and these doubts, or whether they should just give up. Whether they should stop looking for the home that's been promised to them and ordained for them by the gods. Most of us can relate to this in some way, whether it's feeling like you don't understand the material your class is going over, and you wonder if you should bother trying, or you're not sure what college to go to, what you want to major in, or you just feel like you're not quite fitting in somewhere. So in this strange and new shore, the destitute Trojans receive a speech from their leader, Aeneas. He gives his men a pep talk. And even though he's feeling sad and scared too, he still encourages his fellow soldiers. And he reminds the men of all the hardships they've already endured and made it through up to this point. And he concludes, and I'm going to read in Latin here for a second. Vrerocat animos maestunquet morem mittite, forsanet haec olim meminisse iuvabit. Call back your courage, send away sad fear, and perhaps one day we can look back with pleasure on even these things. He assures them they will if they endure, and they send away their sad fear. They will find a home again and see their kingdom rise anew. And it takes a while, and Aeneas and the Trojans endure much. War, suffering, hardship, and loss, but they do at last find their new home, which will one day rise to become the Roman Empire. So remember that hardship, that feeling lost and unsure, that feeling fear and doubts, does not have to last forever if you work through it and if you try. And you can look back one day at the struggles and fears you once had, and you smile because you've overcome them. That's all.